Why do I go over there and immediately like come out of view there? Yeah, yeah, we're live. It's 2:55. Live 2:55. Don't even have to walk, don't even have to drive. Today I want to talk about the video that I just loaded. Excuse me, the video that I just loaded, and that is the intercooler. I promised you after we did the 396 that I would do the Tick Performance air to water intercooler, and it is up. And people are already starting to lose their mind over it, which is cool. I told you I love the comments. I haven't even looked at the top secret comments that aren't allowed. I need to go in there and find out, because all it is the other comments plus Richard, you don't know what the heck you're doing, except they don't use the word heck. He said, "Welcome to the freaking Guardians of the Galaxy." Only he didn't say freaking. So a couple of the engineer types are trying to use these, Boyle's law or these equations. And a couple of other guys are saying that, you're always going to get some sort of boost drop, but, and I don't know. And you guys can let me know in the comments. It might be that I didn't make this clear in the video. If you haven't watched the video, please go watch the video. It's very important. We'll lose the shop. That's for you, Tony. I think that there's some confusion here. Obviously, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm sure I've run more back-to-back blower tests than anybody. And because of the kind of testing that I do, not because of people have done lots of testing, but they just don't do this kind of back-to-back stuff. And I know that when we run a roots blower, a twin screw blower, or a centrifugal blower at different pulley ratios, or when we change other things like cylinder heads or camshafts, intercoolers, that kind of thing, I know what happens when we do that. We know that on a turbocharger, when you put an intercooler in and you have the output, let's say, of the turbo regulated by boost, and you have the regulation valve connected to the manifold, that when you were running 10 pounds before with no intercooler, and now you're running 10 pounds again with the intercooler, the thing that has happened is the turbo is spinning faster. It's going to make that 10 pounds, even if there's a little bit of restriction in the core. On a supercharger, centrifugal twin screw roots blower, when you add an intercooler to a non-intercooled version, you are actually restricting the flow a little bit. But there's nothing that's self-regulating about that combination. It has a fixed blower speed, assuming no slip. The blower speed is going to be the same. So what you've done is added cooling in there. And one of the things that's going to happen is with the cooling, you are going to drop pressure. Those are the laws of physics. So if it's hotter, the pressure is going to be higher. If it's cooler, it's going to be lower, but not by a lot. Not in this case, because we're not talking about very much pressure. I mean, we're talking about going from, 7.5 pounds down to 6 pounds, or from 5.6 pounds down to 4 pounds. So we're not talking about really, really high pressures. And we're also not talking about really, really high temperatures, which is why, this intercooler is designed to cool 20 or 25 pounds at 900 or 1,000 horsepower, or even more than that. So we're at the minuscule part of what this blower is capable of doing. So there will be some pressure drop. But my point in the video, and again, maybe I didn't make this clear, was that there was way more pressure drop, I thought, than there should be, given what this core is capable of. It's capable of cooling this a lot. And it did, even though we're effectively only using like a third of the intercooler core. It dropped it down from 162 to 90 degrees, and a 70 degree change relative to the 162 original temperature is a big percentage. It's a lot. And so it's doing the cooling, even though the fact that we're only using a part of it. But I think that us using only, this much of the core rather than this much, only using that much of the core is more telling on the pressure drop. I think if we were to flow the amount of air that we're asking the blower to flow, or that it's capable of flowing, because we know that the blower will flow a different amount of air at different pressures. So if we put more restriction on one side of it, we're going to limit flow. But if we make that situation under the blower less restrictive, like we did going from the 4.8 to the 5.3, the boost dropped. If we make the intercooler core itself less restrictive, which we would do by adding more space between the blower and the intercooler, allowing us to use all of the available flow area of the core, we would not see that pressure drop. And if we did not see that pressure drop, we should therefore, I think, fingers crossed, see a little bit more of a power gain from the intercooler. And actually, I'm not expecting a big change. I'm expecting some, and I'm expecting it not to drop pressure that much, given the fact, like I said, that we have a 600 horsepower motor flowing through worth of air, flowing through 1,000 horsepower worth of core. So it shouldn't be there. And we're we're not doing the TIC intercooler any justice by using it on this combination at something that's making 4 pounds and we're all not even using all of the core. So we will remedy that. We'll have a bigger adapter made that gives us much more space, so we could use more of that and flow it through there. And then I don't think it'll be a problem. We were worried about that when I did, if you guys will remember, when I did the test with the blower on the high ram, we were worried about all of the air, the discharge air, favoring the front 4 cylinders. As it turned out, the common plenum that's in the high ram, the lower part of the high ram, was enough that the running 802s on that didn't show that we were favoring the front 4 cylinders. One was being favored, but I'm not certain that that's because of the blower. I think that might be because of where we have it might be the air entry, but I think it might be the intake design. You just don't know unless we do more testing. But at any rate, it wasn't favoring the front 4 relative to the back 4. So I don't think we need a whole bunch there, but I think we need more than what we have. I mean, we had almost nothing there because the problem was that the way that the core is, it works well for a high ram lower and a high ram upper, because there's a bunch of plenum volume in the upper and plenty in the lower. And the core actually sticks up a little bit from the mounting face. So we had to have, the guys from TIC made spacers to at least put the plate up above that, but it's still not enough because it's, we essentially have the opening of the discharge going through the very front part, however big that opening is in the Super Ritchie plate, and which basically mimics the discharge of the blower. We're only using that much of the core, and there's a lot more left that we're not using. So I think that what's going to happen when we do that, I think we're going to see a change, and I'm hoping that it's a favorable one. We got a little bit of power, but most of that power was from the extra timing that I put in there. And oddly enough, I don't know why the non-intercooled version, we're running E85 and we're only running 7 pounds. In fact, 5.6 pounds out at the power peak. I don't know why it didn't respond to more timing. I kind of thought it would. I kind of thought we could almost run NA timing on this thing at that low of a boost and running E85. I didn't think that would be a problem at all. But so that's one thing. And then the next thing obviously is the bubbler test. I'm glad that I think it was Boost Novice who asked me to do the bubbler test. I'm glad that he did, and I'm glad that I finally was able to do it. I was able to remember to do it during the dyno thrash that goes on with me there by myself trying to make stuff happen. I forget a lot of stuff because I have so many things that are pulling me in different directions while we're doing that, trying to remember all the different tests that I want to get done or that I can get done in the allotted time that I have. So, but we were able to do that. And basically what we did is we put a boost leak in the manifold, and that's what these bubblers are. They have a valve on them that what they're trying to do is, because I think that they're drawing PCV into that system. And so it accumulates oil like we see in the intake manifold of an LS motor. And so they're allowing the oil to be pushed out basically. But I don't think, but apparently it's a restriction or apparently it's a boost leak. And so I think he wanted to know how much. And so I told him I would do this test. And I don't understand how they could have that big of an opening in there, or why they would need that big of an opening to get the oil out. And it can't just be open because it obviously has a check valve on it so that it's not leaking under vacuum. But it seems like an awful big, I'd like to see what the flow rate is of this check valve versus the opening in the blower and see what that is. But at any rate, if you have a 3/8 pipe plug sized opening in your intake manifold, you're going to lose a lot. We lost 2 pounds at the load in and about a pound, 1.1 pounds at the very top. Dropped it down to 3 pounds. And because we have less pressure there, we're losing less pressure. So relatively speaking, we're still losing 25% of the airflow there, which is a pretty big amount. And we lost a pretty fair bit of power. as you might expect, going from allowing a lot of that boost to escape. One thing I would need to look at, in fact, we can look at that now. I'm sure we had a big drop in charge temperature too. Fluid and air temp. Oh, we're not showing temps on the bubbler test. I wonder why that is. Had I already taken that out, maybe? It certainly wouldn't be very high at just 3 psi. I mean, that's not much over ambient or much over NA power. It's not much over 100 kPa. It went from 126 down to 119 kPa. So not a lot, but 3 pounds is still better than no pounds. So that's good. So let's see what you guys got going on. It's Friday. You ain't got no job. Just watched the last M90 video. Good stuff. Thank you. Wasn't the cooling of the air create more dense air, lowering the pressure? It does. There is a drop in pressure from the change in temperature, but not 1.5 pounds. 5.3, 823 ported heads and cam M92 intake. How much nitrous can I run? Well, the first thing you can't run those 823 heads on your 5.3 because those won't fit. So what's the next plan? Unfortunately, the M90 is way out of its efficiency range. 160 degrees at only 5.6 pounds is pretty high. Great horsepower for a little bitty blower. I don't think 162 degrees is too hot for that boost level. And especially given the fact that when you're running a positive displacement blower like that, even with a bypass valve, you're starting at a much higher temperature. And it started out way higher than the intercooled version, which is one of the benefits of the intercooler that I didn't even talk about, and I should have in the video. And that's that while the motor is sitting there idling, let's say, or even when you were running down the freeway at 2000 RPM or whatever, the starting charge temperature is going to be higher. The recirculation of the bypass valve definitely helps, but you're still talking about an initial charge temperature that's going to be over 100 degrees. Whereas with the intercooler, it was already starting out much lower, 30 or 40 degrees lower. And it's much better to start from there and then only rise up a little bit. I don't think we only had about 10 degrees rise, I think, on the intercooled stuff. But we had a much higher starting point and a much higher ending point because we were starting higher on the supercharged stuff. Classic rides, I have a 5.7 with the LS3 823 heads ported, and I ran as much as a 300 shot. So you were able to fit an 823 head on a 5.7 bore? Does it fit on a 890 bore? Scrolling. Need relative pressures above and below the core. Well, I gave you those. I gave you the pressures before we installed the intercooler. But you're right. It would be a good idea to have pressure. I don't know how we could. Well, we might be able to get that through the spacer maybe, because the pressure above the intercooler core might tell us how much more restrictive that is. Still at work. I think my friend might have quit his job due to ridiculous hours and deceptive practices by the company. Uh-oh. Yep, the doggies are in the back. Watch me break the internet again. We'll see that the video is doing fairly well. I'm happy, but I wish I could have shown what the intercooler really does. It's bored to 3903 and MLS head gaskets. I run a 300 shot all the time, no issues. So those valves will fit on a 3900 bore. Richard, how much porting is done by jokers? I don't know. I haven't done it yet. I haven't seen them. All we did was the entry on it, but I think that their stuff is a lot. They're going to do a lot of porting on the entry plate going into the rotors, which I think is going to help a lot. It's going to get my junkyard Gen 6 454 running this weekend, but Summit took forever to ship my distributor gear. Oh well. I can work on getting the heads on a different engine. I think porting the outlet side might lower charge temperatures a little bit, less friction from the sharp edges of the triangle. I think that'll help. What's everyone drinking? It's holiday season, whiskey and eggnog. I am not an eggnog fan. My wife likes it and my son like it, but it's not my cup of tea. I think using Permatex Ultra Gray for thread sealer on the intake bolts will work and hold up. I've done that before. We've done it on the dyno, but a lot of times the stuff that we do on the dyno is not ideal. It's not right. It's just right now. Like on the M90 when I put it together, I used Ultra Gray on putting the sealing the rotor pack and then sealing the what is it, the snout, the pulley snout. Hope everyone's doing well, sick as it can be. Uh-oh, no fever, but the sinus pressure and now congestion started last weekend. There's lots of stuff going around. Going to a comedy show, that's always fun. I like doing that. It's good to go out and get a laugh. I was lucky enough, I got to see, I remember going to see Sam Kinison, and she was in concert. It wasn't in a small venue, but it was awesome. Stock bottom end, Gen 3, 5.3, 799 heads, Truck Norris, 2,200 pound two-wheel drive off-road Woods hill climb tube chassis. Cool. Safety boost with an M90, yes. Was the pre-intercooler boost higher, possibly higher restriction? I'm thinking that it would be. It would kind of make sense, but we couldn't run I didn't run a pressure probe between the blower and the intercooler. There wasn't very much room. I don't even know if I might have been able to get something in there. Rich, it's 862 heads. Okay, that makes more sense. 92 millimeter throttle body. How much nitrous can I run? We've run 300 shots on carbureted stock bottom end 5.3s. Oh, we do need a poll today, right? Thanks for the reminder. Will be we had a plenum volume from a spacer plate. Help with Okay, let's see if I have that right now. So yesterday I kind of got a miss on the poll question. Will the added plenum volume from a spacer plate help with airflow and horsepower on the TIC air to water intercooled M90? That should be pretty straightforward, I think. I was going to get my junkyard Gen 6 working, but yeah, you saw that about the gear. It was hard to weld the case without warping it. I don't know. I didn't do it. Jason from JT Fab welded the inlet on it, and we were wondering about that. And I just kept spinning it as we bolted it on. It seems to work. I didn't measure it for warpage. Stock crank and stroke with a 6125 scat rod. Summit forged piston is a small cam. Yeah, 595. I don't know. If you're talking ugly ducking in the future, if you're talking about cam size, give us the duration at 50. The lift says almost nothing about the camshaft. What sealers do you use on all the head bolts for 454? We normally use the Teflon, the white Teflon stuff. And we use the liquid, and I don't use tape on those. And on bolts, it's actually less critical than it is on studs. On studs, it's kind of mandatory because water will come up those. But we put it on bolts too. A 3800 supercharged swap Fiero. Nice. That's awesome. And a bunch of spare blowers. So this series has been fun to watch what the max power output could be. Yeah, admittedly, we're already getting into the ridiculous zone of what people would do to this kind of blower. Seems like we're putting a lot of effort into what's probably a questionable blower. Not that an M90 is not okay, but this particular one is it's just a junkyard kind of thing. I have enough junk here to build a flat top 5.3 or an iron 5.7. Just not time right now with the shop. Hey, Eric, I hear you. All you want to do is eat and sleep. I actually just went for a run. I took the puppies out because they get nuts if they don't get exercise. So I took them out for a run, and now I need to take Milo out. They have to go out at different times unless we take them all out up into the hills. Milo walks a lot slower than the puppies want to go. When are you going to do a 4.6 Rover engine with the M90? Nah, that's probably not going to happen. But a 4.6 Ford probably would be more likely. On the last two surveys, the question didn't show until I selected an option. It is weird. Move your cursor around and hover around and see if it comes back. I'm going with no one on the poll because I don't think it will be significant. Theoretically, it has to help a tiny bit. I'm trying to figure out how to do the math for the temperature change right now. I don't think math is going to answer the question. Marty, what's up? What's the brand of Teflon? I think the stuff we're using is actually Felpro. But other people make it though. It's available at any auto parts store. What's better than on a Friday than talking about Boost? That is good. But I'm going out with Lisa, so that's even better. It's fun stuff to ponder. I agree. I do like playing with math stuff, and I do that sometimes too often. I go through all the data and start calculating stuff, and I'm like, oh, look at this. It's good stuff to talk about, but I still like the dyno better. I think the only way we'll be able to answer whether or not we can get more power from that is if we do that test. And since I have the spacer there that's there, and we'll make a bigger one, I just have to get everything, because when you reconfigure the spacer, there'll be other changes too. Most notably, a different belt length is going to have to be used because that now we're stacking the thing higher and higher. But I do also have a Holley low ram, so I could do a low ram high ram test. Although you guys are already going to see that NA, which that video is coming up. And I spoiler alert, the stuff that you're seeing NA, it's going to do that under Boost too. What's the next engine to play with? X-Cop Hemi 5.7 would be great. I tried to get one of those from the Motor Trend guys, but they're using it for something. I do have a 5.7 Hemi video coming up though. I have cams and also intake manifolds that were tested. A bunch of different 5.7 Hemi intake manifolds. Permatex, that's right, Burns. That's the other one I was trying to think of. But it's questions that people on a budget ponder. Which questions, Nicholas? Trying to scroll back and see if I missed your question. Do you get mountain lines where you are? Yes, we do. I'm in Northern California, and we have mountain lines here. Richard put a second M90 on it. That's in the works. How much does it cost to make dyno runs? A day of dyno testing varies depending on where you do it, and whether or not, with a lot of shops, it depends on whether or not it's carbureted or fuel injected. Usually more elaborate stuff gets to be more expensive. The smaller can make more power on the 5.3 M90 blower. I don't know. I didn't ever run that. The other question I have is, can you get away without putting a sealant around the coolant passages on the intake and head? I always like to do that. If I'm putting the thing together permanently, I put silicone on the head and then attach the gasket to it. We do that normally before we set the intake manifold on, just to keep it lined up. And then I usually put a little bit on the outer side of it too, if the intake's going on permanently. I don't do that very often, because not very often am I putting a motor together where this is the last time it's going to go together. Usually it's going to come apart 100 times. So if I've just put sealant, if I put silicone and it hardens with the gasket in place on the head, we can do intake swaps. I can even do head swaps, and we'll leave those intake gaskets on that head, because then it can just be used over and over again. One question, Rich: will the 92 millimeter throttle body fit a 102 millimeter plate? The adapter plate that I have actually was made for a 102, and we're running a 92 on it. Larry, that's cool. Studded tires and stuff. That's awesome. That's a pretty lightweight vehicle too. I figured the majority of the boost drop after the intercooler went on is just due to the charge cooling, like the opposite of heating a nitrous tank. There is that, and we've talked about that. It's just that there was way too much, because they've run supercharged motors with this intercooler before at much higher boost levels and much higher power levels, and the boost drop is not what we're seeing here. That also tells me that this isn't a cooling thing. I'd like to see how much of the change in boost is just temperature related, and I'd have to figure out a way that we could make that happen. Are flex fuel injectors beefier than traditional? What you mean, stronger? Like you can't break them in half? They do flow more, if that's what your question is. If you run an engine with and without power steering pump to see what the power draw is, we have on the engine dyno, but the problem is that I've never disconnected one on the chassis dyno, and that's really what you'd need to see, because the pressure that it's putting in the system is different than we see by looping it on the dyno, because we're just looping it and it's not creating any pressure. So the pump doesn't have any resistance. So that might be better on a chassis dyno. $284 to $296 at 50 is a cam. That's a good size cam. Tons of 5.7 cop Hemis at the state auctions. Let's see. Let's assure the LS pot. I got busy that says a 534 are identically a Vortec, or technically a Vortec. So I don't know why you're even making a comment. There are tons of 5.7. Okay, we got that. Let's see. I'm surprised there's an iron 5.7. I only recall LS being aluminum. I don't know of any 5.7 factory displacement, unless it was in Australia or somewhere. You can make one out of a 5.3 pretty easily, or a 4.8. The LS1 was aluminum. And location, yeah, the location makes a difference too. Andy, and some of that will also depend on how well the angle of the head and the intake fit. And obviously, you've already mocked this up to make sure that the flat portion of the intake is not hitting the China rail. That there's a little bit of standoff there when you bolt it down, so that you don't have to machine that. So that I never use a gasket there. We always just put silicone there. The rear-facing throttle body M90 causes fitment issues in certain chassis. Is there a good solution? Only 180-degree loop or a squared off 180-degree loop. I've seen those. If you take a look at Kenny Bell's stuff, they've done some of those where, because theirs is a rear entry blower too, so they've done intake manifolds that are a giant opening into their blower because you want them to be giant. And then as much room as they can go back, and it's not a piece of tubing that flips around. It's just a squared off like intake manifold with then now an open throttle opening, what would be next to the blower. And that works pretty well. He doesn't like when I change position. Any vacuum drop across the throttle body? There wouldn't be in this case, because that's not where the restriction is. Let's see, I'm scrolling back. I have an L92 with a stable solid roller setup, but it's a stock bottom end for drifting. Can I turn 7,500 or just stick below 7,200, 7,000? I have no idea. I don't know why you have a solid roller in there for running only that engine speed, because hydraulic roller stuff will go way past that. But that's on you. I don't know about drifting in terms of the strength of the motor. I don't know what has to be done there. I don't know if constantly bouncing out the rev limiter and that stuff. I don't know how bad that is for things. That kind of RPM range is certainly doable, but I don't know about the rev limiter stuff. I think the trucks with 5.7s were iron, but I don't think they sold many with that engine. Check online. They'll say the numbers might be a good oddball and parts could be a pain. Burns, are you saying that they put 5.7 LS motors in trucks? Is that what I'm reading there? Richard, if I'm able to send you another junkyard blower with a finished supercharger adapter, would you be interested? The blower is smaller, but should be approximately 20% more efficient. Well, what is it? Just tell me what it is you're doing. Can you tell if any pressure is lost through the bypass valve? There isn't any. The bypass valve is closed. Richard, to ensure that you didn't get flow separation from the blower to the core, the taper of the spacer needs to be 7 to 12 degrees, but that might make it a bit high. I think you're missing out on what this is. I think maybe you're not understanding what this is. There doesn't need to be any taper on the spacer. The spacer is going to be a stacked spacer that's straight. The airflow is not going to come out and touch the spacer very much, and it's not. And where the spacer is, it's not going to entry into the core. The spacer's out on the flange. Richard, with that thin plate and tiny gap above the air-to-water core, how is that affecting the rear four cylinders? We already know that it wasn't affecting it at all, because we ran the blower like that with the discharge favoring the front four cylinders and did 802s on it before the intercooler. So we know that that's not happening, because we have the same plenum volume in the lower manifold that we had with just the blower. So that shouldn't be an issue. I think that the issue is that we're not using enough of the core to flow through. Sean, what's up? So you got to watch the video? The Vortec 5700 is a L31. Yeah, that's right. That's a different motor. That's a different engine family. Ugly duckling. Oh, I'm going to scroll back. Is that big cam that you told me about? $284, $296 cam in an LS motor you have? It seems like a lot. Would you consider running an M90 at 18,000 plus RPM reliable or proof of concept? It's made coming up on it's more than 100 pulls already at that RPM. So I seems to be working so far. I don't think I would go out and run the Silver State like that. Oh, Burns. Okay. Yeah. They did make 5.7 Hemis and they were iron blocks. TVS 1320. I never even heard of a 1320. I was wondering if we could simulate that load by mounting the engine at an angle to simulate the constant G load and running the heck out of it to see what it is, to see what's weak in that situation. The tilt of the motor is not going to do anything but except hurt the oiling. Can you run an M90 on a street car without an intercooler? Yeah, you can. We already did it a lot. Okay, that's why you're running the. I have a solid roller setup because the big and very rapid RPM changes and drifting because of clutch kicks and those things that are a bit of overkill and extra reliability. Okay, that's a good idea. Like I said, I don't really know what goes into a drift motor. I don't know what they change for that particular form of motorsports. Have you tried or looked into hanging the M90 on the side of an engine rather than on the intake? All of those things are possible. I mean, Ford already did that on their 3.8 liter. Yeah, Michael, that's a good point. The gentleman who was asking about can you run an M90 Apex running a M90 without an intercooler, that's the way that they came from the factory on literally millions of 3800 V6 motors, and even with a smaller M62 before that. I would be leery of people coming in here and trying to, this is a troll warning. So people coming in here and trying to stir stuff up, just don't even pay attention to it. Did you get to do any research on the SAE standards? I didn't yet. It's like the people that talk about motors and engines and, that sort of thing. And foot pounds and pound foots and pound foots. I like it. With just a large box spacer, you'll generate vortices just below the blower from flow separation. A tapered spacer prevents this and is more efficient. Where do you want the taper? Do you want the taper in the plate that's attached to the blower? Or do you want the taper on the spacer that goes around the wall that just attaches to the plate? Because putting a taper in the spacer exiting the blower, I would doubt that even be measurable. And also tapering the plate, or tapering the spacer that the plate attaches to, is, we wouldn't be able to do it for one thing. It would be it'd be much more difficult to machine and drill and tap for everything. And also it would not do anything. A tapered runner, that's something we could talk about. If you consider running a diffuser under the M90 to attempt to spread the intake charge across the intercooler, in this test, I don't know if you've even looked at the video yet. If you haven't looked at the video, there's nothing under the blower. There's just intercooler right under the discharge of the blower. There's no room to put any sort of diffuser or anything like that. That's what we need to do, is we need to space the blower up away from the intercooler core. It's horse torques. There you go. Horsepower's. Enlargement of the opening of the plate toward the bypass opening may mitigate the need for a spacer. We thought about making the rectangular section go farther back toward the bypass valve, if that's what you're talking about. But there's still just, I mean, we're talking like, this is a ½ inch or less. It's right next, the plate is right next to the intercooler core. And I want to put more spacer under there anyway for something else. Valve covers, heads, coil and plugs connection. I don't know what that is. Rover, let's see. Just want to see what can be done with a supercharger, junkyard supercharger on a little Rover V8s to make them feel a little more modern. I've never even run a Rover V8. I don't know what bell housing any of that is. Is that the little Buick 215 or something, or is it something else? There's some early iron blocks that are cast. I've personally never seen one in person. They're unicorns. You've never seen an iron 4.8 or 5.3 or 6.0 block? Aren't all of them like that? Have you ever seen sprint car engine heads before? Yes. I saw a set the other day at the machine shop. The ports were at a very straight angle compared to conventional angled heads. It was pretty neat. Were they Fords or Chevys? Which ones were they? Wonder how an M90 would do on a 351 with a short runner, low intake manifold. Well, you can take the numbers that we're doing and apply it to any other motor. Because right now what we're effectively showing you is what the flow rate is of the supercharger. So it doesn't just do this on an LS. It would also do this on other motors that have similar starting NA power outputs. 12-degree heads, yeah, altered valve angle stuff would be normal. And then a lot of them were doing candid valve stuff, a la Cleveland Ford stuff. Ever try running an LFA or LZ1 GM 6-liter aluminum? I think they have Cathedral 243s. They that 6-liter LS is the same as every other 6-liter LS in terms of what it does in terms of power. So any 6-liter that we pick, you'd adjust it a little bit based on compression. But if it has a 243 head and we put this cam in it and this intake manifold, it does what all of the other ones do too. So if you get one, you should get one because they're good. Is it possible to make 2 smaller intercooler cords below the intake manifold, essentially making the manifold the spacer? You want to? I don't. We already have the problem solved. We don't need to change anything. We just need to raise the plate up. Does the blower nullify the need for long runners? No, runners do the same thing whether it's boosted or not. So the Rover is a board and stroke 215. Okay, what is that bell housing unique on the 215? Is it shared with anything else? I would think if you space the blower up away from the intercooler, maybe 1 inch would make a difference, but a half inch. I'm not going to do it a half inch. I'm going to do it 3 inches. I'm gonna put some space in there. we're gonna make it. We're gonna give it enough. I think the Rover came supercharged. I think that they did have some on. What are the Land Rovers or Range Rovers that have the blower motors in them? They're like 4 liters or something, right? They raise the ports on the heads with 12-degree valve angle too. I don't know. I don't know which heads you're talking about, but there's a lot of really, really high flow, both Ford and Chevy. I don't know about the Dodge side of it. Maybe there are. Because when you can make a custom head, then you can do everything that you want, everything that you want to do. Tramp TR8. Yep. Rover bell housing unique to Rovers. Okay. 3-inch spacer. Yeah, we're not 3-inch spacer. If you installed it in a car, it would be tall. It would already be too tall for what we're doing right now. This is just bordering on the ridiculous now with the high ram and the intercooler. And then if we add this spacer to it, I mean, we could stack all this down on the low ram and make that work, and it'd be a little bit more realistic. But we do need to have room between the blower and the intercooler. I just want to see what it's going to do. This is not a combination I'd ever put in anything. The Rover with the blower is a Jag motor. Okay. Not related to the Rover V8. Land Rovers or Buicks or Pontiac base motors with M112s. So how's our poll doing? 81% are saying that the added plane volume from a spacer plate will help with airflow and horsepower on the TIC air-to-water intercooler. Burns wants to know, either of you guys know a trick to run 8 injectors on a 4-injector standalone with the ability to idle without raising the heck out of the map? Can you have it idle on 4, Burns, and then have the other ones come in later? Can you put an RPM switch on the others? BMW V8 is a train wreck. We need a physicist in here to do this math right now. My math shows the boost should have gone down to 3.1 psi just by going from 162 to 90. That seems like a lot. Any plan on running the M90 on a 6-liter? I don't know if I have a 6-liter available right now. But again, we already know what it's doing because this 5.3 makes as much as most 6-liters do. I mean, the 5.3 made 545 NA. That's a pretty good 6-liter. You're not a qualified mathicist. You kind of can, but the mini UL on them can only go so low, so it probably takes some extra effort that I don't want to make it work. Yeah. It would be cool if you could bring them in, like a progressive nitrous, just progressive injection. Just feed them in a little at a time, like you do when you change the pulse width. Okay. We got 2 more minutes. 82% saying yes. We'll end our poll there. I was pretty happy with the temperature drop. I wonder if the temperature will drop even more if we have more flow through more of the core. M90 on the 396. The 396 is certainly making is in the power range where we could run an M90. You know, we got to swap the M90 with the 112 on this set to see how big that jump is. Actually, I don't. I have no interest in that at all. An M12, an M112 is expensive and hard to find. And we kind of already know that a bigger blower makes more power. So having done that many, many times, I'm much more interested in going down the silly rabbit hole with the M90 and then doing 2 of them. Regarding runners, if the boost PSI times the intake volume is sufficiently greater than the cylinder volume, then the pressure should reduce the effectiveness of runners. Here's what happens in the real world with intake runners. If you have your intake runners creating a given power curve, like let's take a stock LS or a stock small block Chevy or anything, and you add the same amount of boost to it, the shape of the curve will be exactly the same. There will be no change in the effectiveness of the runners. The reflected wave doesn't change. The reflective wave is going to go up and down because it's traveling a distance, and the distance doesn't change. The pressure could change the speed a little bit, but hardly even a measurable amount. So intake runner length does exactly the same thing under boost as it does NA. I know that not because of math. I know that because in the hundreds and hundreds of times that I've tested it, it always does that. There's a guy with 240Z, the small block Chevy with 2 sets of 8 injectors, low octane one first set added, high octane to the second set. Very cool, but look complicated. It's on YouTube. 2,000 horsepower on a small block Chevy. That's a lot. Is this the best chat on YouTube or what? There's a lot of sharp guys here. Do you think the spacer will help the hot air spread over the intercooler core for a cooler charge air? I do. That's what I'm wondering. I mean, we had pretty good temperature drop already. We had 72 degrees of temperature drop, which is a lot, but we weren't using all of the core. So we might see even more there. I think what we would see at least is less of a temperature drop and maybe a little bit of a power gain. And then if we see more of a temperature drop, I mean, less of a pressure drop and a little bit more and a little bit of a power gain. If we see also more of a temperature drop, that's just going to be icing on the cake. On a 706 head, if I do a basic head porting valve and shroud job myself without touching the chamber, well, if you're unshrouding the valve, you have to do the chamber because that's what unshrouding the valve is. Will I lose power at any RPM, and what are the power gains can I expect on a 6-liter at peak horsepower? I don't know the answer to that. A 706 head, you can easily get from just chamber work, you can get 15 CFM without doing any porting inside. Now, if you go in and start doing some bowl work, which is the next area that you want to look at, don't do any port matching or anything because that's the last thing that you want to do. If you unshroud the valve, and especially if you put a 2-inch valve in there from the 799 head, then unshroud that valve, but even unshrouding the stock valve on the 706 head, and then bowl work, you could easily pick up 25 or so CFM without doing hardly any work. And that would definitely help in power because the 706 head in stock trim on a cam 6-liter tends to get a little bit limited. Richard, is the boost versus NA? do a lot of those. So people want 3 M90s now? Yeah, that's probably not a thing. Michael, you're more like a utility knife. I'm interested to see if a second M90 overwhelms the intercooler. It won't. Because we already know that the core is good enough for 1,000 horsepower and like 25 pounds, because they've run it on that kind of stuff a lot on boosted LS motors with turbos and different kinds of blowers on them. So that's already been done. So putting a second M90 on there is, I mean, that we might get to 1,000 horsepower, something like that, with two M90s, which is, I think, possible. So that's going to be right in this thing's wheelhouse. What kind of cam profile should be looking at to maximize low end torque more than stock, switching from standard lifters to rollers for the cam profile? I think you're going to be hard pressed to beat stock power at 2,000 RPM and lower. You don't think two M90s can make 1,000 horsepower? I do. I think two of them can. Robert, we've done the M90 with a turbo already. We already done that compound stuff, and I did a compound with twin turbos going into, or I should say, the guys from HP Performance did, and I just did this story on it. They did twin turbos on a 03 Cobra motor feeding the M112 blower. I'm interested to find out. Oh, a second M90. Yeah, that's. I think that, in fact, what a second M90 will do is cure all of these problems, because a second M90 is going to have a big common plenum. We don't have to worry about spacers anymore, because the way that the twin blower setup is it's all open in the center. So it's not going to be close to the core, where the discharge is going to be on the side. So that will cure all those problems. For cams on positive displacement boost, not turbo, any overlap changes? No, you just forget about the fact that it has boost on it. Pick the camshaft for what you want it to do in the motor. Do you want it to drive around nice? Do you want it to idle nice? Do you want it to get good mileage? Do you want it to have chop? You pick the cam for all of that stuff as an NA motor, and then you just add boost to it. If I work to unshroud the valves and change the chamber size, I will lose compression, and not all chambers will have the same size. Don't worry about that. You're talking about doing hand ported work on a junkyard set of 706 heads. You shouldn't be concerned about all that stuff. You could mill the head after you did that if you wanted to bring the compression up, but since you're putting a 706 on a 6-liter anyways, you're getting a lot of compression. BC4, yeah, 862s, you can do work on them. You can put bigger valves in them, which somebody had sent me a set, and we did the airflow testing at Brian Tooley, and putting the bigger valves in definitely improved the airflow. Now, if you do the unshrouding the chamber, which I think he did, that makes a big difference. Cam we went with for the Z06 drove great, nice, until the trans let go. That's not uncommon. That is not uncommon. 4 days after you tune it, did you hate spending the money on the tune and then only to have it blow up? One more minute. 59. Yeah, 1 minute. 59. 59:30. Ben, that's why I'm here, man. We're all here to ask questions and answer questions and talk about Bigfoot, all the good stuff. Just here to learn about history. I'm up by Sacramento. I tell everybody if they want me to tune to make power, that means we're testing their transmission to expect failure. Nice. That's true. You do find whatever the next weak link is. If it's not a connecting rod or a piston, then it's something south of that, back toward the rear of the car. That happens. That does happen when we're doing stuff. A lot of times, if it's a manual trans, a lot of times it's the clutch. You're like, oh, great. Now we got to put it, because you make more power, then the clutch starts slipping, and then you put the clutch in, and you're like, now something else is going to break. Alex, CCing the chambers takes like 10 minutes. It's not hard at all. If you have the pieces to do it, but otherwise don't worry about it. Just try to do about the same, and then don't worry about it. You're obsessing about something that's this much. And on that note, it is time to go. Worry about the big things. That's how life is. Don't worry about the small things.